Hello. I'm going to start today with a question. At what age do you think it's appropriate to start having alcohol and drug talks with your child or with your student? Take a second to consider this. When is the right time to talk with kids about alcohol and drugs? The truth is, there isn't one right time or one right conversation. There will be many opportunities. Welcome today to talking to kids about alcohol and other drugs. My name is Maria Valerio, and I'm one of our youth initiatives coordinators here at the Metro Drug Coalition. In this webinar, I'll be covering some practical tips for having those conversations with youth around alcohol and drug use in a way that is developmentally appropriate for the different stages of childhood or adolescence. And later, I'll share some resources for further reading and tell you a bit about what the Metro Drug Coalition does for youth prevention. For context, today I'll be referencing the 8 stages of development, a theory developed by a man named Erik Erikson in the 1950s. This theory says that with each stage of life, there are basic needs that need to be met for youth to develop into strong, contributing adults in their communities and their societies, and resilient adults. I'm providing this context today to reinforce the idea that drug and alcohol use isn't a one-time conversation to have. Instead, it's going to be an ongoing conversation that grows as the child grows. So we'll start with early childhood, 5 to 8 years old. At this age, children are gaining more of an understanding about the world around them, but it's still limited in a lot of ways. They have needs, including a sense of safety, a sense of trust in their adult caregivers. Routines and clear rules are really important. And youth can be likely to understand medication safety at this age. That can be a great starting point for conversations. You can keep it simple and concrete. For example, medicine is only safe when adults give it to you. Too much medicine can make a person really sick. Sharing medicine with others is never okay. Using these simple, concrete statements are easier to understand for a child at this age. You could also use teachable moments. If you're watching TV and a character makes a risky choice, you could use that as a jumping off point. Maybe ask your child, why do you think that they did that? What would you have done if that were you? Do you have any questions about what we just saw? This is also an age where it's important to establish and reinforce family rules and expectations. It is against our family rules to take medicine by yourself. If you do, there will be consequences. For example, we will not play with your doctor set today because you got into the medicine cabinet without asking. We have to remember that medicine is serious. It's not a toy. So reinforcing and establishing these kind of expectations can be really helpful. And at this age, repetition is likely needed to make things clear. Lastly, remember that the way we talk about substances can have an effect on the way a child thinks that substances should be used or are normally used. So try to model healthy behaviors and healthy choices yourself. Instead of coming home and announcing that you need a drink or maybe a cigarette to de-stress, maybe come home and announce that you're going to de-stress with a cup of tea or by reading for an hour. The Metro Drug Coalition has a series on this, a series of videos that are really cool about modeling healthy behaviors that can be found on our YouTube and on our socials that we had done this summer, and they're awesome. So next we'll talk about the preteen years, about 9 to 12 years old. As a child is growing and their brain develops, they're able to consider more complex ideas at this age. They may start to wonder how they fit into the world, and their needs might be centered around things like belonging, fairness, curiosity, and an increased sense of independence. Conversations around drug and alcohol use needs to be proactive for preteens, meaning you should be having these conversations even earlier than you think. Unfortunately, we've seen even elementary age students using substances, bringing them to school and things, and being exposed much earlier than a lot of people would assume. During these conversations, you can start getting more specific about the health risks of drug use. Chances are youth at this point might have been exposed or at least seen or heard about substances like alcohol or tobacco. You can use these kind of common substances to start the conversations. For example, that man we just passed was vaping. Do you know what that is? Did you know that smoking can be really harsh on a person's lungs? Talk about what substances are, why they're risky, and what your expectations are again. So, for example, some people make the choice to use drugs. However, in our house, we don't use drugs to cover up our feelings. And in this stage, you can invite questions as well. In my experience, youth of all ages will often have questions about drugs and alcohol, but they don't want to ask. They think that if they ask an adult, the adult is going to assume that they are using drugs or assume that they are wanting to, that they're curious about it, so they won't ask. When I tell them it's okay, this is a safe space to ask. I'm not going to assume anything about you just because you're asking. Lastly, this is a chance to start exploring why people use alcohol and drugs. You can explain that some people use them to cope with hard things, but that rarely helps. And that's why we practice dealing with our stress in fun and healthy ways. You can use this time to teach coping strategies. The website have left at the top of this slide is Pathways to Success. I like this resource because it gives coping strategies specifically for this age group. There are some exercises that youth can do on improving their self-talk and talking to themselves positively. There are resources for doing like feelings check-ins with your preteens, coloring and journaling exercises, things like that. At this stage, it's going to take more than kind of the just say no or because I said so type attitude. The youth will want to understand why and know that they can come to you with questions. Lastly, we'll talk about teenage years, about 13 to 18. The needs of teenagers might sound familiar. They need to feel even more independent. They're figuring out their identity and how that affects them when it comes to being accepted by their peers. They need to feel some sense of autonomy, and they don't want to be lectured at. So keep the tone conversational and non-judgmental for your teen. Again, though, chances are there will be chances for this to start organically. So maybe maybe there's an opportunity where your youth is how to do a football game at their high school. Yeah, you can totally go to the football game tonight. You know, when I was in high school, people used to kind of hang out in the parking lot and drink alcohol or smoke. Does that kind of thing happen at your school? Do you know what you would say if somebody offered you something? This is an excellent opportunity to build trust with your teen by helping them develop an escape plan if they need out of a risky or uncomfortable situation. One really cool resource is called the X Plan. If you Google the X Plan, a few different things will come up. And I left one website in particular here on this page called Positive Parenting Solutions. But basically, the X Plan goes like this. The teen and their adult or their caregiver agree that if the teen ever texts an X, that the adult will call or text them right away to come home. This way, the teen has a valid excuse for leaving whatever situation they might be in. The website that I have linked up at the top, it's really great because it goes into more detail about why this plan can be effective. And it also gives some of the challenges or success stories that parents have had using this type of plan with their teen. At this age, it can resonate more with teens to talk about immediate and real life consequences. So, like losing their license because they drove under the influence, or losing the opportunity to play on a sports team because they failed the drug test. These can be more effective than talking about long term health risks, especially when it's connected with their goals and their values. So, ask your teen, what are their goals when it comes to school or even their career or their relationships? How do they think that substance misuse could impact the things that they care about? Maybe this is a time you could tell them about your own values and how they guide your everyday decisions. Or better yet, maybe you could tell them about a time when your values didn't match the decision you made and why you ended up regretting that or how you had to fix it. Acknowledge risks for teens, but stay supportive. Teens need to know you're in the corner even when they've messed up. So keep the door open. Here are some tips, some things to remember across all ages. Talk often. Short, frequent conversations can be more memorable and less pressure than one big alcohol and drug talk than when the student enters middle or high school. And be as honest as possible with questions. If you're not sure about something, maybe tell them you don't know, but let's Google it together. Let's look it up together. Try to stay calm over what they might say or ask. get a lot of questions from youth that, as to an adult, they can come off sounding, the kids can either ask things in a sarcastic way or in a way that sounds kind of silly or sometimes just very genuinely. By not overreacting to whatever they might say or how they say it, we can create an environment where the youth feel safe to come back and ask more questions later and trust that you are a good source of information. Lastly, besides just having these conversations, you can focus on building the protective factors that we know help a youth avoid drug misuse, like feeling engaged and connected to their family and to their school, like having a positive self image and self esteem, like having structure and routines, and having skills built regularly and worked upon. The Metro Drug Coalition engages with youth in a variety of ways. Uh, First off, this list is not exhaustive, but just some of the major things we do. We do classroom-based presentations that can be through the Knox County school system or even through an after-school site or a summer camp. And we can come in one time or two times and talk with youth about whatever topic they're needing education in. A lot of our talks do tend to be drug and alcohol based. So, for example, Catch My Breath is a vaping education course that we do in conjunction with the juvenile court who sends us referrals. And Generation RX is a medication safety course for elementary age students. However, not all of our lessons are strictly about drugs and alcohol. Our positive action lessons focus more on building skills, on building those social emotional skills we know can be really effective in helping kids have that positive self-esteem and avoid drug misuse. And lastly, besides talking with the youth themselves, we also try to reach the people who are with youth every single day. So educators, teachers, summer camp staff, etc., and parents as well, parents, guardians, foster families. And that can be in a variety of ways. We do trainings for educators. We try to attend parent events and school nights to give out information and spread knowledge and awareness that way. So remember, in conclusion, the conversation about drugs and alcohol isn't just about what you say, it's how you listen, support, and show up for young people at every age. There are two more resources I want to share for some excellent tips. The first one is from SAMHSA. It's called 5 Conversation Goals for Talking to Youth About Alcohol and Other Drugs. This resource is really helpful for specifically knowing how should this conversation go when you do decide to start it. Another resource from NIDA is Start a Conversation, 10 Questions Teens Ask About Drugs and Health. I really like keeping this one handy and on me when I'm in the classroom, when I go anywhere where youth are, because it really does hit the nail on the head for what youth ask about drugs. There are questions about, can a person become addicted to their ADHD medication? Or what happens when a pregnant person uses drugs? These are questions I hear very frequently. So thank you very much for listening today and your attention. Please follow our series and check out the next webinar that we'll be releasing soon. And you can follow us on our socials on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, and on LinkedIn. And thank you so much for joining today. Appreciate it.